Have you ever smiled while your own family destroyed your reputation, because you already knew something they didn't? Imagine standing in a room where every person is laughing at you. Your parents are proud of it. Your sister won't even look at you. And everyone believes you're the family failure. Now imagine that less than 24 hours later, every single one of them discovers that the entire event they celebrated, the most important day of their lives, only happened because of you. Stay with me until the end, because this story takes a turn no one in that ballroom saw coming. And if stories about betrayal, redemption, and unforgettable karma are your favorite, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to read every single one. My name is Paige Mercer. I'm 33 years old, and until 2 weeks ago, my family believed I was the biggest disappointment they had ever produced. They were wrong. They just hadn't learned the truth yet. The invitation arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The Mercer family requests the honor of your presence at the wedding of Emily Mercer and Jonathan Hayes. My younger sister. The golden child. The daughter who could never do anything wrong. I stared at the envelope for several minutes before opening it completely. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. Not because I hated them, but because every conversation ended the same way. Why can't you be more like Emily? You always quit. You'll never build anything meaningful. Eventually, silence became easier than explaining myself. I almost threw the invitation into the trash. Then I noticed something unusual. At the bottom of the card was the logo of Aurora Events, one of the fastest-growing luxury event management companies in New England. A small smile crossed my face. Because I owned Aurora Events. Not publicly. Most clients never knew my name. My business operated quietly through executives, project managers, and attorneys. Privacy had protected me for years. Apparently, it had protected me from my own family too. They had spent nearly 10 months working with my company without realizing the woman they had erased from their lives was paying the salaries of every planner organizing the wedding. I should have declined the invitation. Any reasonable person would have. But something inside me whispered. Go. Not for revenge. Not to embarrass anyone. Just to see whether, after all these years, they had changed. Deep down, I already knew the answer. The wedding took place at Ashford Manor, one of the most exclusive venues in Connecticut. White roses covered the entrance. Crystal chandeliers reflected across the marble floors. A live orchestra welcomed guests as servers carried silver trays filled with champagne. Everything looked flawless. Exactly as my company had promised. No one recognized me. Not the wedding planner. Not the photographers. Not even the venue manager. That was intentional. I preferred it that way. As I walked into the ballroom wearing a simple navy blue evening gown, I spotted my parents immediately. My father shook hands with guests like a politician running for office. My mother smiled for photographs while proudly introducing Emily as our greatest blessing. Neither of them noticed me standing only a few feet away. Until my aunt quietly pointed in my direction. My father's smile disappeared. For one brief second, I saw annoyance replace surprise. Then he forced a polite grin and walked over. Paige, he said flatly. I didn't actually think you'd come. I was invited. He looked me up and down. Well, at least you found something respectable to wear. Same voice. Same judgment. 6 years had changed absolutely nothing. I smiled politely. Because this time, I wasn't the woman they remembered. And before that night was over, someone in that ballroom was going to uncover a secret that would change the Mercer family forever. The ceremony began just as the sun dipped below the trees, bathing the gardens in a warm golden glow. Every detail unfolded exactly as planned. The flowers were perfect. The music started on cue. Guests whispered about how breathtaking everything looked. Listening from the back row, I couldn't help smiling. Not because my family looked happy. Because my team had spent months making sure this day would be unforgettable. Emily walked down the aisle with tears in her eyes while my parents beamed with pride. To every guest, they looked like the picture of a perfect family. Only I knew how many cracks were hiding beneath that polished surface. After the ceremony, everyone gathered inside the ballroom for dinner. I quietly took my assigned seat near the back, far from the family table. No surprise there. A few minutes later, my cousin Rachel slipped into the empty chair beside me. "I've been trying to find you," she whispered. "You know, your parents still tell everyone you couldn't keep a real job." I let out a quiet laugh. "Do they?" She nodded awkwardly. "They say you've spent years drifting from one failure to another." I simply lifted my champagne glass. "If that helps them sleep at night, let them believe it." Rachel studied my face. "You're not upset?" I looked toward the head table where my father was shaking hands with local business leaders. "No," I answered calmly. "They've spent years believing a story that no longer exists." Before Rachel could ask what I meant, the master of ceremonies tapped his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin dinner, the bride's father would like to say a few words." My father stood confidently as the spotlight followed him to the stage. He adjusted his tie, smiled at the crowd. Then his eyes landed directly on me. The expression on his face told me everything. Whatever he was about to say, it wasn't going to be kind. My father rested both hands on the podium, waiting for the room to quiet down. "I've been blessed," he began, smiling at the guests. "A beautiful wife, a wonderful daughter who's starting a new chapter tonight, and a family that has always stood together." Applause filled the ballroom. Then he chuckled. "Well, almost always." A few people laughed politely. His eyes locked onto mine. "My oldest daughter, Paige." He paused just long enough for every head in the room to turn toward me. "She always believed she was destined for something extraordinary." More laughter. "But sometimes life teaches you that dreams don't pay the bills." The room grew louder with amused chuckles. My mother smiled without looking at me. Emily lowered her eyes but said nothing. "She walked away from this family years ago chasing some impossible business idea," my father continued. "I suppose we've all got one relative who thinks they're secretly a millionaire." Several guests laughed openly. Someone at a nearby table whispered, "That's embarrassing." I remained perfectly still. Inside, memories I had buried for years resurfaced. The day my father told me I wasn't leadership material. The afternoon my mother said investing in me would be throwing money away. The countless family dinners where my opinions were ignored before I had even finished speaking. Tonight was simply another chapter in the same story. Except, this time I wasn't powerless. My phone vibrated beneath the table. A message from Ethan, Aurora Events Operations Director. "Everything is running smoothly. Final vendor payments have been processed. Congratulations on another successful event." I smiled without replying. If only he knew whose wedding we were managing. Across the ballroom, my father raised his champagne. "So here's to Emily," he declared proudly. "The daughter who never disappointed us." Thunderous applause echoed through the room. Then he added one final sentence. "And let's all hope Paige eventually finds someone willing to rescue her from her poor decisions." The laughter this time was louder than before. I slowly stood. Not because I intended to argue. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I had finally reached the point where silence no longer protected anyone. The ballroom gradually fell quiet. My father looked pleased, convinced I was about to apologize or storm out. Instead, I smiled. "I'm genuinely happy for Emily," I said calmly. "She deserves a beautiful wedding." The tension eased slightly. Then I continued. "And I hope every single guest here enjoys tonight, because my company worked very hard to make it unforgettable." Several people exchanged confused glances. My father's smile faded. "What company?" he asked with a laugh. I looked around the ballroom. The floral arrangements. The lighting. The orchestra. The luxury decor. Every perfect detail surrounding them. Then I answered. "Aurora Events." A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Emily frowned. "Wait." My father forced another laugh. "You work there?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "No." A long pause filled the room. I built it. The laughter disappeared instantly. One of the wedding planners standing near the stage slowly nodded. So before anyone laughs at the woman you called a failure, I said quietly, you should know something. I reached into my purse and placed a simple business card on the nearest table. My name isn't just Paige Mercer. I'm the founder and CEO of Aurora Events. And every beautiful moment you've celebrated tonight exists because my team made it happen. The silence that followed felt heavier than any speech my father had ever given. No one laughed anymore. They simply stared. Because for the first time in their lives, the Mercer family had absolutely no idea what to say next. For several long seconds, the ballroom was completely silent. My father's confident smile disappeared as if someone had switched off a light. That's impossible, he whispered. Before I could answer, the venue's general manager walked onto the stage. He looked at me first, then turned toward the microphone. Mr. Mercer, I'd like to clarify something. Every guest watched him. Ms. Paige Mercer isn't simply employed by Aurora Events. He nodded respectfully in my direction. She's the founder, CEO, and owner of the company that designed, planned, and financed every operational detail of this wedding. A wave of shocked whispers swept through the ballroom. Emily's bouquet slipped from her hands and landed softly on the floor. My mother's face turned pale. Marcus, my cousin who had laughed the loudest only moments ago, couldn't even meet my eyes. My father stared at me as though he had never seen me before. You built all of this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I did, I replied calmly. Without your money. Without your approval. And without your permission. His lips trembled. But, why didn't you tell us? I smiled sadly. Because every time I tried to prove myself, you had already decided who I was. He lowered his head. For the first time in my life, the man who had always spoken with absolute certainty, had no words left. Then my phone vibrated. It was a message from my chief financial officer. Paige, the board approved the acquisition proposal this morning. Congratulations. Mercer Holdings is officially ours. I stared at the screen for a moment. My heartbeat slowed. Because the company my family had spent years worshipping had just become the next piece of my future. And they had absolutely no idea what that message truly meant. No one spoke. The music had stopped. Even the waitstaff stood frozen, unsure whether to continue serving dinner or quietly disappear into the background. My father looked from my face to the phone still resting in my hand. What acquisition? He asked, his voice no longer carried the confidence that had once filled boardrooms. I slipped the phone into my purse. That's business, Dad. He took one hesitant step toward me. Paige, please. Let's go somewhere private and talk. I smiled gently. For years, you said I wasn't worth listening to. Tonight, you can listen right here. Every guest remained silent. No one wanted to miss what happened next. Emily slowly walked toward me, tears filling her eyes. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, I replied softly. You believed the story you were told. She looked down. I'm sorry. I reached over and squeezed her hand. This was never about you. Then I turned back to my father. You spent years convincing everyone I was the family's greatest failure. You mocked my dreams. You laughed at my ambition. And tonight, you tried to make me the entertainment. He couldn't meet my eyes. I was wrong, he admitted quietly. They're only words now, I answered. An apology matters most before someone has to survive without it. His shoulders dropped. For the first time, he looked less like the powerful businessman everyone admired. And more like an old man realizing he had spent decades pushing away the daughter who only wanted to be loved. I can't change the past, he whispered. No, I said. But you can live with it. I looked around the ballroom one final time. Every flower. Every light. Every elegant detail. Everything my company had created. No one there would ever forget this night. Not because of the wedding. But because the woman they had pitted turned out to be the strongest person in the room. I picked up my coat. Before leaving, I walked over to Emily. I hope your marriage is filled with something we never had. She frowned. What's that? Peace. She hugged me tightly. It was the first genuine hug I'd received from anyone in my family in years. Then I walked toward the exit. This time, no one laughed. No one whispered. Instead, many of the guests quietly stepped aside, creating a path for me. Several nodded with respect. Others simply smiled. Outside, the cool evening air felt different. Lighter. For years I believed success would make my family finally love me. I was wrong. Success doesn't change people. It reveals them. That night didn't give me revenge. It gave me freedom. And sometimes, freedom is the greatest victory you'll ever win. A few months later, Aurora Events expanded into 3 new states. Our team doubled in size, and we became one of the fastest-growing luxury event companies in the country. As for my family, I heard my father retired quietly and rarely attended public events anymore. Emily sent me a handwritten letter after her honeymoon. It contained only one sentence. I hope one day we can build a relationship based on truth instead of comparison. I wrote back. When you're ready, my door will always be open. Life is too short to carry hatred forever. But it's also too precious to let anyone convince you that you're less than you are. If someone has ever made you feel invisible, if you've ever been underestimated, remember this. Your value is never decided by the loudest voice in the room. It's decided by the life you build when no one believes in you. Thank you for spending these moments with me. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional story. And before you go, tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you were standing in my place that night? Until next time. Take care of yourself, believe in your worth, and never let someone else's opinion become your identity.